Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Dane, your host of the Rock and Metal Guardian. I hope you're doing well wherever you may find yourselves. Today's episode is long awaited, at least for me. Is hair metal really metal? So if you think about hair metal, and I'll mention some bands, I'll rattle off some bands right now. I'm using my phone for my notes. I fell in love with the notes feature on the phone. Think about the following bands for a minute. Rat, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, Cinderella, Motley Crue, Dokken, Poison. They're often lumped in the hair metal category or subgenre of rock. Now, when it comes to Rat and Motley Crue, I will concede that Rat's EP with the woman's legs and the fishnet stockings with the rats crawling up her legs is very metal or approaching metal, good enough for me. And that first full-length vinyl record, Out of the Cellar, is metal. Some blistering guitars there, really, from Crosby and DeMartini, and the vocals. I remember in high school, at first not liking the harsh vocals of the lead singer Stephen Pearcy, but that grew on me. It's some heaviness to that. Motley Crue's first album and their second album is, I would call, definitely heavy metal. But after that, those two bands launching into more of pop commercial waters, but more on that. All right, so let me get back to the top of my notes here. So when we think of hair metal, or if you think about hair metal, it's very commercially melodic pop in so many ways. It's light or bubbly. You have a lot of whoa-ohs, and what I mean by that, think of Bon Jovi's whoa, Living on a Prayer. Think of, the lighters and that kind of thing in the arena, although that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be hair metal. You can do that in any rock arena or folk, really, but it pairs well with the whoa-ohs kind of thing that goes on at a Bon Jovi concert or other of the bands that I may have mentioned, Motley Crue, of course. And I got this idea from a friend in high school and had never considered it. When Belinda Carlisle's song on MTV became very famous, and it is, oh goodness, now I'm trying to think of it. It is Heaven on Earth. And if you listen to the melody and the flow of the song, it sounds very similar, because it's not exactly like, but it sounds very similar to a Bon Jovi song. And the Bon Jovi song that I'm trying to think of eludes me. But it's very Bon Jovi, and it's very Bon Jovi-ish, and we wouldn't call that hair metal at all, would we? I hope not. And yet it has so many, listen to the song, and it has so many similarities of what we call hair metal. Something that you can clap your hands to kind of thing, the whoa-ohs and that kind of stuff. Sing-along stuff. Metal is not sing-along, or most of it is not meant to be sing-along, I don't think. In addition, when we think of hair metal, we think of the flashy glam style outfits, the glitter, the bandanas, the fringy suede things that Bon Jovi himself used to wear, although that can be metal as well. But hair metal kind of took that over and kind of reappropriated in a way, I think. Now, appearance doesn't equal the music stylings, if you will. And what I mean by that is, recently someone said that you can kind of consider Rush a punk band because they were stubborn and went down swinging and disobeyed the record company after Caress of Steel, you know the story, and did 2112 anyway. Well, to me, and I mentioned this before in a different video, it's the music that matters most. One of those that you can have all the isms and ideologies you want. What it boils down to is the type of rock depends on the type of music that you play, the stylings and that kind of thing. But anyway, but you can kind of associate glam with appearance. You can, but it's not the be-all, end-all, as I'm saying. Similar vein, lots of teased hair. That's not very metal. Keyboards. Keyboards are way too intrusive. There's a right way and an incorrect way to do keyboards. That'd be something down the road, a different video. Think Rush, think Moving Pictures. That's the right way. You have, and this is more funny than anything and not meant to be taken that seriously at all. I'm sorry, not meant to be taken seriously, if at all. But I remember getting upset, and this is back in the day when I was 15 or 16, and I was a Bon Jovi fan, and of course, that didn't last very long. But I remember getting upset because I was into Manowar at the same time, and the lead singer of Manowar was saying, I don't know what all these bands are doing. They get on stage and all this smiling is about. And I'm like, what's wrong with smiling? And then I came to understand what he's talking about, that heavy metal is, the lead singer said, we go on stage, we kick ass, we kill, we slaughter. Of course, he's being metaphorical. And then we leave and go home. There's no smiling, no crying in baseball. There's no smiling in heavy metal kind of thing. So I kind of get that now, that metal has a certain shtick to it. Like no crying in baseball, no smiling. There's some smiling. There's always going to be some smiling. But I get the point. You got to look tough. Like Dave Mustaine at first was against... I can't remember his first name, Young, the guitar player on the third album, So Far, So What, So Good. He's like, you can't wear surf shorts, you gotta wear jeans. And then he also told Marty Freeman, you gotta get rid of the blonde out of your hair. That was in his biography. That's not metal. So there's a certain look that goes with metal, you can argue, and hair metal doesn't fit. First of all, I hate the phrasing hair metal, because other bands that are metal that aren't hair metal have long hair. Hello. Anyway, but that's neither here or there. So keyboards get in the way, lots of teeth, smiling kind of thing, the Manowar anecdote that I just said. And then party-themed music, drinking, whoring, having a good time, relationships, love songs, ballads, in and out of love, getting your heart broken, or, about just having a good time behind closed doors, and I'll leave it at that. That's kind of metal, but metal's more than that. Now, here's the kicker why I don't think hair metal is metal. The heaviest parts of hair metal songs are the guitar solos, and that's it. So you have these heaviest parts of the songs, as I said, are the solos, which offer sometimes a nice juxtaposition or an interesting juxtaposition, but too often a contradictory mixed bag or mixed message, because you have all this melodic whoa-ohs and party and smiling and the glitter and the headbands and all that, and think Poison, right? But then you get a blistering solo. So the solo may be metal, but the rest of it really doesn't. Again, it's an interesting juxtaposition to that solo, but is it really metal? So think of early bands like Iron Butterfly, Vanilla Fudge, Steppenwolf, Uriah Heep, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, etc. Those are the big ones, right? Those proto-metal bands, but we don't call them metal. Where at times these bands venture into heavier waters. And that occurred, but you wouldn't call them heavy metal. You have some heavier stuff on an album, but that doesn't make the whole album heavy metal, and therefore the band not heavy metal, right? Let's take Dawkins Under Lock and Key. Some of it is heavy, but some of it is slow ballad type stuff. You have the heavy song, Till the Living End. As an example, Lightning Strikes. Those are probably the two heaviest songs of the album. I think they both and each side back in the vinyl days, right? And then you get ballads like, Hunter is kind of a half ballad, half rocker, but then you get Jaded Heart, which is a ballad, and then there's another ballad that's eluding me, and then you get It's Not Love, which is quasi heavy. So it's not really metal, it's hard rock with some party type stuff. So can't call it metal because of the differences from track to track. If you're consistently mixing up metal or proto-metal or slightly heavier stuff like Till the Living End, and if we stick to Till the Living End and Lightning Strikes, which are clear, I would argue, heavy metal songs, but everything else is not heavy or as heavy, those two, can you really call that a heavy metal album? And therefore, can you call it a heavy metal band? Same thing with, if we stick to the George Lynch era, can you really call those? Because you have Tooth and Nail fits the same format. We have this inconsistency, as opposed to, say, an Electric Wizard album that is metal through and through, or Metallica's first album, metal through and through, or Ride the Lightning through and through, and Master of Puppets for the most part, and Justice for All, that kind of thing. All right. Now let's talk about Judas Priest's British Steel. This is the same problem. You have songs like Metal Gods. You have songs like Rapid Fire. Those are probably the two heaviest songs on the album. But then you get Living After Midnight, which Martin Popoff would argue is like a Kiss song because it's that party themed. I mean, if you take some of the guitar bits out, it could pass and change the production. It could pass as a 50s hit, right? That kind of thing. So keep that in mind. Breaking the Law is kind of heavy, but I wouldn't call it a heavy metal song. I would just call it a hard rock song. Barely a hard rock song, or approaching or just above hard rock, somewhere in that area. So by contrast, to what I've been saying about Dokken and British Steel by Judas Priest, there's so many examples. By contrast, if we take Volume 4 by Black Sabbath, everything on there is very doomy, and when we get to the third and fourth album, the tuning that Iommi was using changed from the first two albums. And I want to say it went from an E to a C, but don't quote me on that. And so you get this low, more sludgy stuff with Master of Reality and Volume 4. And then it changes again for Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. But Volume 4, we stick to that. It's all doomy and sludgy and heavy, and that's that slow, heavy vein, right? But then you get that one song changes, a ballad. But the album is 90+% heavy metal, so you can call it a heavy metal album, therefore a heavy metal band in this period. And they're pretty much a heavy metal band through and through from the beginning to the end of their career. But all Ozzy was doing with the song changes, whether you love it or hate it, was going with the convention. Most heavy metal bands, not in the current era, but most heavy metal bands in the 70s and 80s and 90s, or 80s, I would say, was where it stopped. You would have, if you were a true heavy metal band, all of your songs on your album would be pretty much heavy, but you would have one or two ballads, and that was it. Okay? But with hair metal, there isn't enough of that heavy. So is hair metal really metal? So Volume 4, stoner metal, doom metal, and Master Reality is where that begins, right? Take Metallica's Kill 'Em All. All heavy on that album. So it's metal through and through. So, with the exception of Rat's EP and the first album and Motley Crue's first two albums, Rat, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, Ellie Gunn, Cinderella, Dokken, Poison, and there are more. Dangerous Toys, Tora Tora, some of the Here Today, Gone Tomorrow metal bands, Faster Pussycat, let's see what else, Puss in Boots, god-awful band, Enough's Enough, there's another one I'm trying to think of, Britney Fox, Bang Tango, okay, you get the point. If these are metal, okay, then you have to call bands like Sweet, Moxie, Angel, Stars, T-Rex, and even some of Bowie's work heavy metal. Okay, because then you would be inconsistent if you didn't do that. Now, what about the, metal has evolved argument? Well, I've never considered these bands metal because of some of the things I just said. The metal evolved argument, I think, is some weak tea. The metal has evolved because of what I said about we have inconsistencies on tracks. I don't think Judas Priest can be called a heavy metal band until you get to Screaming for Vengeance. There's some hint of it on British Steel, but if you look at the album in between Point of Entry, you have ballads like, forget about Side 2, because all of that is very rock and roll and straightforward, and you have kind of a proggy song, the first song on Side 2, which the name of the song is eluding me. You have just some basic rock tunes like Troubleshooter and I'm drawing a blank here, but the song that's very proggy has golden halos in the song lyrics. Anyway, but if you talk about Side 1, which is a genius Side 1 of Point of Entry, one of the best Side 1s in all of hard rock, if you will. It's more of a hard rock album. You have songs like Hot Rockin', Turning Circles, which is a great song. You have the ballad in Desert Plains. You have Heading Out to the Highway. That's hard rock. This is a hard rock album. It's not heavy metal. So So with respect to Metal Evolved Argument, I'm going to argue, and it's just my opinion, that I've never considered these bands metal. Poison, Rat and Motley Crue, the first two, as I said. But other than that, no. That's the exception to the rule. So, sorry for the clarification. So with respect to matters of inconsistencies in a band's catalog, so again, if we talk about Judas Priest, there's some metal there, cementing with Screaming for Vengeance, and then Defenders of the Faith, and then definitely Painkiller, maybe their heaviest album, and the last two albums are pretty heavy for the most part. But if you look at Rock-A-Rolla, their debut, that's not heavy metal at all. That's just rock and roll. I mean, the song Rock-A-Rolla itself is a nice, fun, party type, tune. If you had Poison do it, it would come off as a hair metal song, but it's not. It's rock and roll at its finest, in many ways. It's rock and roll in the expectation of what you think late 60s, early 70s rock type to be. If you talk about Set of Wings of Destiny, there's some heavy metal moments on there, but it's not heavy metal enough to consider it a heavy metal album nor a heavy metal band. While they share similarities, they're just not enough. Rock-A-Rolla versus Screaming for Vengeance, as an example. So essentially, the overall thing that I'm trying to get across, and again, I'm not saying you have to agree with me, is I think hair metal, with the exception again of those first two Motley Crue, there may be other examples, that hair metal is essentially just commercial pop with a heavy metal guitar solo somewhere in the song. And that's not good enough to label it metal in my estimation. So let me explain that further. Let's look at Journey. Songs like Don't Stop Believin', One More on the Trial by Fire album, which is considered a soft album. If you take those two songs alone by Journey, there are others. There's a couple other songs on Trial by Fire, but those two, Don't Stop Believing and One More, there's some blistering, amazing heavy guitar work from Neil Schon. It's not hair metal, but if you're going to call Cinderella and Poison because it's melodic and has a heavy metal guitar solo, then you have to consider Journey a hair metal band. And you wouldn't do that. Same thing with Styx. Crystal Ball, Sweet Madam Blue, and Renegade, just three of many examples, have some blistering guitar work by the wonderful Tommy Shaw. Some stuff on Grand Illusion as well. You wouldn't call that hair metal. Kansas, Carry On My Wayward Son, has some amazing heavy guitar there as well. You wouldn't call that hair metal. And if you think about Kansas's live album, Two for the Show, there's just some amazing blistering solo and guitar heavy driven stuff by both Livgren and Williams that is just phenomenal. You wouldn't call that hair metal. Let's talk about Boston's debut. Much of that debut is got some blistering guitar licks and riffs and solos from Tom Scholz. You wouldn't call that hair metal. Let's talk about Sweet. The album Sweet F.A. and some of those tracks make its way onto the American version of Desolation Boulevard, which is essentially Greatest Hits album. The song Sweet F.A., Sweet Fanny Adams itself, has that galloping heavy metal, or the heavy metal galloping we know and love, which predates Iron Maiden. We don't call that heavy metal. That outro on the same song, Sweet Fanny Adams, it's so blistering. We still don't call it heavy metal. We could, but they're not a heavy metal band. That outro solo is so heavy. Hearts Barracuda, same galloping thing or similar galloping thing, which they plagiarized from Nazareth. That's not heavy metal, nor is Nazareth. So Heart, Nazareth, not hair metal. Back to Sweet for a minute. Give Us a Wink has some amazing heavy stuff from Andy Scott on there as well. Some blistering stuff. It's heavy, but you have that melodic stuff from Brian Connolly in juxtaposition to that, very hair metal-like, but we wouldn't call it hair metal. It's glam rock. It's not glam metal. So finally, do you really want to lump together, say, Poison, Rat after their debut, Motley Crue after their first two albums, and all the other bands I mentioned, Bon Jovi, Cinderella, you name it, Dokken, Tora, LA Guns, do you really want to lump them together with, say, the likes of early Metallica, Merciful Fate, Queensryche, early Iron Maiden, Opeth, Electric Wizard, Kyuss, High on Fire and Sleep? I think not. Anyway, just my opinion. Take care. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Bye now. Blessings.